just have to remember to mute myself on YouTube. Good. Yeah, so thanks everyone for coming to .NET Knots tonight. Again, this is our New Year .NET Knots. So I hope you had a good break. Before we do get going though, we have got a code of conduct for tonight. There's a lot of words there, but basically it means just be nice to everyone. If you do feel as though you're being made to feel uncomfortable for any reason, then just get in touch with either Jess or myself. You can just use the DM facility in the chat here if you like, or you can get in contact with us on Twitter. You'll find our details are in the chat too in there as well, or you can go to that bit.ly and find other contact details for us as well. But we do take this quite seriously, so do be nice to each other. We've got some sponsors, like most people have. We've actually got a new sponsor tonight. We've got Tech Nottingham, who I'll talk about in a second. We've also got my company, PJG Creations. Essentially, I'm paying for the website now. I used to be paying for the Zoom license as well, but that's what Tech Nottingham are now doing. We've also got Stickers, who make some fantastic, stickers and other swag. They do sponsor some stickers, but as we're not in person, then we're not giving them out on the usual table we would be doing. And coincidentally, we've also got JetBrains license to give away. On the Tech Nottingham front, then do go and join their Slack. They're fantastic Nottingham-centric tech community, but they are worldwide. There are people from all around the world as part of that Slack, and there's a channel in their Slack there for pretty much anything you like, from counting to crochet, and obviously programming languages as well. So do go and join their Slack channel through that link. And thank you so much to them for sponsoring our Zoom license from now on. So tonight we've got Rachel Appel, and she'll be talking about software product line engineering. So we'll get going with that shortly. JetBrains, as I said, they're sponsoring us a single product from the JetBrains range. So you can tweet on that hashtag .NET Knots, and we will choose somebody at random to win a 12-month subscription to a single JetBrains product. Anything from ReSharper to WebStorm, PHP Storm, and IntelliJ, and all of those. Rider is another good one. So do check that out and tweet away. Both me and Jess and quite a few other people in this meetup group as well are MVPs, and if that's something that interests you, a journey to go on that towards becoming an MVP, then do get in contact with any of us, certainly me and Jess, and I know Stephen Pears there is also a brand new MVP too, so it's a great thing to become and strive to become, so do go and do that. Coming up, we've got Myra Wenzel. I'm not quite sure what she's going to speak about. In fact, I think she sent me a tweet there a minute ago while I was speaking, so I think she might be covering the architecture of the .NET website, which should be quite interesting. And that will be on February the 22nd, the usual time is 6:30. Knots IoT next month, we've got Terence Eden and Peter Shaw. Terence will be talking about the Connected House of Horrors, and Peter Shaw will be showing us how to mod your USB gadgets and program them with .NET. I myself am also part of a stream that we call Azure-ish Live, where we do sort of live Azure programming, and we've made Git watchers and DevOpsy type stuff. So that's worth checking out every fortnight normally. Quite a few people on this call, I think, are also speaking at NDC London. Obviously, this isn't a free event. This is a paid event, but it's well worth going to. Some fantastic speakers going along to that, including Amy Boyd and Jess, in fact, is speaking, and I myself is speaking. And
I'm not speaking this year.
No, you aren't, in fact, are you?
But I did want to point out the keynote for NDC is streamed live and is free. So if you want to see the keynote, you still can. Isn't
one of the tracks free as well? Sometimes they do that.
No, not this year.
Oh, okay, that's disappointing. So, yeah, well worth doing that. And I'm also part of a podcast, the Agile Engineering Podcast, and we've got episode 10 out at the moment with Tom Geraghty on psychological safety. So that's worth mentioning. And then that's all from me, but Jess, in fact, I've got one more slide after this, but Jess, did you want to talk about School of Code?
Yeah, can do very quickly. Sorry, I just needed to press my mute button. So School of Code is a free boot camp that is run about 4 to 5 times every year. They have just moved from basing their whole course on JavaScript to moving to C#. Yay. I'm looking for volunteers to help with mentoring, doing code reviews, etc. So if you are interested, please get in touch and I will put you in touch with School of Code to see how you can help.
Fantastic. Ordering of these slides could have been better. If you're interested in IoT, this should have been up where the IoT slide is. Then myself and a few other Pluralsight authors are making a set of courses to help you pass the AZ220 IoT developer exam. So it's worth checking that out. And if Pluralsight interests you, I've got a few free 30-day licenses for Pluralsight. So hit me up and I can give you some of those, but only if you promise to go and watch my course, you know, so it works. But with that, we will pass over to Rachel. I'll stop sharing my screen, and Rachel, you can start yours. It's worth mentioning just before Rachel starts that we are live on YouTube at the moment. So if you don't want your webcam to be on YouTube at moments like this, then do by all means turn your webcam off. But you're more but either way, oh no, good. For some reason, my
Looks like Pete's having Zoom difficulties, so you might as well start, Rachel.
Okay, yeah, yeah, it's hard to hear Pete. Oh, there he is gone. So,
I don't know what happened there. I disappeared for some reason.
okay. So the only thing I need to do right now is, here we go, switch over to my other monitor for the slideshow. There we go. Okay. So can everybody see the slides? Okay. All right. Everybody's muted. You have to see your heads. All right. So this talk is on software product line engineering. So it's something people don't hear about often or at all. So I've been kind of getting into this recently as part of a master's degree program, and it's one of the things I've been working on. So I wanted to give some talks and get feedback from people in the community and see, kind of gauge how people react and if this is something that's of more interest to people. At least here in Europe, I'm based in Germany, there seems to be a lot more interest in this. Back in the States, where I'm originally from, this is just kind of like not, it just hasn't hit there yet. And it's not like it's a new thing, but it just hasn't really picked up as a kind of popular methodology at all, or a practice to do. So let's take a look at it and see what everyone thinks. So what is this thing anyway, a software product line? So a product line, or sometimes called a product family, it's a group of software products or software systems, and it's built from common assets. These assets are managed and they satisfy specific needs of a market segment. And by looking at this definition, you may say, well, that sounds like regular old software architecture. And it does fit into regular old, software architecture and software design. But there is a few points of focus that make this a little bit different than a standard single systems product. So we'll take a look at what those are and then also how to do this. So first, a few of the product lines that are out there. Our stuff, JetBrains. If you've used the JetBrains products before, you'll notice if you move from one language to another, from Java to .NET to JavaScript, and you use different products, they are eerily similar, right? So you'll see the same controls and features in one and in the other and in the other, but yeah, there are these vast differences in them as well. So what JetBrains is not doing is they're not rewriting all of this code for every product. That's just ridiculous. Also, they're not taking this code and replicating the whole code base either and then tweaking it. That doesn't sound ridiculous, but once you start doing it, it becomes just out of control very, very quickly. And a lot of people have had this issue before. So we're one. There's a lot of stuff in the physical, tangible world, like cars. Toyota has the whole Prius line. Honda has the Accord line. Anything that has a set of car or a series of cars, right? They're built off of a platform. Phones are a big one. Everybody who has a phone has a product line. for both the hardware itself and the firmware that runs it. And the same for the cars. Any of the firmware that's in the cars is done on a product line for software. And it's kind of similar to the way a product line for hardware is also architected as well. Visual Studio is a product line where you have your different editions. Linux has a product line, and right, that one there, everybody, oh, geez, yeah, right? It has different distros. So this qualifies as a product line. Some popular rental software like HomeAway, and they just converted from being HomeAway and they sold out or sold to somebody, and now they're VRBO. But if you go to homeaway.com, it'll redirect you to this VRBO. But if you go to homeaway.com.au for the Australian website, and you look at the two sites, they're virtually identical looking with a few differences. So you could actually tell very easily that they're a line. So these are lines that are generally advertised somewhat as a line, right? Like JetBrains IDEs, Visual Studio. You know there's related products. You know there's a whole bunch of Priuses in that line. But there's a lot that aren't. They're enterprise systems, and people aren't selling these as packaged software like Visual Studio or JetBrains products or cars. Stuff like financial systems, e-commerce, or insurance, right? Insurance is really great with this, right? Because you'd have an insurance product and you sell another insurance product as opposed to selling the software. But somebody needs to write the software to be able to capture all of the customer's information so that they could sell that insurance product. So we need to build something from that common set of business rules and things that go with insurance. So from that, we get product lines. So there's a lot of stuff that doesn't have a name and a nice little, shrink wrap box to it, but it is used internally as a product line or in tandem with customers, like e-commerce systems. Things similar to Shopify, where you have a little e-commerce website and you sell it to a customer, and then you sell it to another customer, and this other customer wants to sell widgets, and this one wants to sell gadgets. And so they're both doing the same thing. They're both selling stuff, but there's a little difference, right? So what we want to do is we want to take reusability in software, and we want to take it out to its ultimate form, which is not just reusing components and little bits, but reusing an entire product, right? You think about it, that is the ultimate that you could reuse software with. So that's what this kind of boils down to. So there are product lines out there everywhere. You're probably using them somewhere in some fashion, and you might have a good need to apply some of these practices to your own software. So what it is not. So I told you what it is, but there's a lot of misconceptions. So an API, while you may have an API as part of your line, an API in and of itself is not a product line. It is just a resource to get stuff from, right? Often a REST API, or it doesn't have to be REST, right? It could be an API that's OS specific or something, right? So it's something we program against. Just plain old reusable components. We'll absolutely have tons of those inside of a software line, but in and of themselves, they're not a software line. The clone and own systems, as I mentioned, if you write a product, like say you make Notepad, and then you need Notepad with bigger fonts for old people like myself, and you create that product by copying, pasting, and modifying the code, it's a clone and own system. It's technically not a line because I've duplicated that instead of sharing resources. Customizable software. While software is customizable, JetBrains software is customizable. The fact that the end user can customize it does not make it a line, right? So if I have Notepad, but I can make the font yellow one time and then blue another time, that does not make it a product line. It's a single product with customizations in that case. Also suites, like Dynamics from Microsoft. There are many shared components across Dynamics, but they're totally different products, and they're just bundled often together for licensing. Same thing with some of Adobe's suite. Right? So there might be some shared resources between products, but a suite or a licensing bundle is just for licensing. So this is about architecting for the ultimate reusability, and these are all much, much smaller level reusability that we're looking at here. So for product line engineering, why we might want to do this, and what good is this for, right? Because we all could take a code base, we could fork it, and then run off with it and do our own thing, and we could keep doing that and doing that. But what is that going to get us if we keep cloning and then working on those new systems? Right? So why would we do product line engineering? Well, getting to market from version to version. If I have multiple individual products and I have to install a feature into each of them, it's going to take a lot more time. So you can reduce your time to market by architecting your reusability in such a way that it can shorten the time. When you're shortening that, you can also reduce your code size because it's not being repeated. I mean, this is, if you think about it, don't repeat yourself. If you're using, say, a software line engineering technique as opposed to just standard single system technique, you're going to have a lot more code in a single system that's duplicated. So it's not very dry at the system level, at the product level. Right? And we usually think of stuff like dry as well at the module level or a small granular level. So the level here that we're dealing with is much bigger. It's out at the product level. Quality assurance is a lot easier. If you think about JetBrains product line or even Visual Studio or many pieces of software like that, if you find a bug in one thing, say it can't save a file properly, that's going to happen across the board. Whereas, this could be sporadic if I have it architected differently. So defects are easier to manage and can be reduced a lot. Maintenance is a lot easier. Resource consumptions are often much better. And you can make the common look and feel much more common across the products. So you'll notice that with our product line. It's pretty striking. It's a JetBrains product just by looking at it. Even if you customize the themes and the fonts and things like that, you know what you're dealing with. So those are some of the benefits. There are downsides, though. Nothing's perfect. So in the beginning, you're going to spend the time. That's where you get to spend the time. There is a break-even point that I'll show in a few slides. But up front, you have to put in the cost, the time, and the effort. Now, taking that upfront time and going back and convincing the boss that that's a good idea is yet another battle, right? That's something that's very difficult for some people, trying to say, look, if we spend this time upfront, same thing with testing, right? If we spend this time upfront to test properly, then it'll be better down the line and in the future. And then management goes, but monies and monies. That's, that's the never-ending battle. Exactly. So if you migrate, right? So this is great if it's greenfield too, right? The grass is greener in the greenfield project. If it's not a greenfield project, you're going to come to that next version where you say, I need to turn this into a product line. Well, this may take away time from product building to re-architect the system to turn it into a line. It would be a significant refactoring for many products. So that could be a downside. Now that will pay off over time, but right now, again, with management, it could be an issue. As you do go along with more and more products, you might need some specialized personnel that work specifically with the needs of the whole product line instead of individual products. So you would think of, like, Office is a suite, not a product line, but they do have enough shared assets that there are specialized people that work across the whole suite, and it would be a similar thing here. Also, developers, we tend to think about reuse. We think about that component. Maybe, depending on how old you are, going all the way back to the little COM DLL, things like that, right? Or an API or something, some kind of web controller, whatever. Reusability at the component level, but we have to start thinking in a much bigger box, which is at that product level. So those are some of the downsides you may have when you think about moving to a product line or starting a new product in a line. So here's that break even. About 3 products in. And what happens? You have that break even point. Before the break even point is the ugly, swampy mess where, you might be re-architecting the system or spending all the extra time up front. But once you pass that break even point, this nice light blue profity zone right here, where it gets better and the number of products with an approach of a product line gives you all of these great returns, better, fewer bugs, easier ways to track them, easier maintenance, faster time to market, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a break even, and it's, if you look through academic literature, which is what I've been doing quite a bit of, it comes out about 3 versions in break, which is not too bad for a break even. Here's Rolls-Royce's break even, right? They hit right at like 3.5, right? So they had several projects that they went through with their lines, their cars, and like I've ever even sat in one of those cars. But here's Rolls-Royce, right? So with their software or whatever they have in the car, it breaks even around 3. And there's a nice little link down here that if you, I'll put the slides out on GitHub, and I guess Peter, Jessica can tell you where to get them. And if you go look through here, they actually have a paper telling you exactly how they did this, right, with Rolls-Royce. So if we take a look at, say, clone and own systems, we have this product, and we might have a product with features, these various features. And then we get a product 2 with features. And then I make some changes, maybe to those features or to the baseline of the product. Okay, if these are separate products, then what happens when I get a bug or I need to come back to this first product and make an enhancement, right? Bug fix or enhancement. That doesn't necessarily show up in product 2. So already 2 products in, and I have a bit of a glitch if I am just like forking and running off with a whole new clone of a system. And then imagine if I then, I make changes here in product 2, right? I would need to keep up with product 1. And even with one tiny example, you can imagine this can get out of control quickly, especially when I start adding more and more products and more changes and more products and more products and more changes. Well, we might want all these different features and changes, but by the time I've gotten through a few products, it's getting so out of control to be able to manage. And you would end up needing staff just to manage all of these changes. And as a matter of fact, I cannot tell you the name of the company, but it is one of the biggest insurers in the United States, had exactly this problem. And it was to the point to where they had to hire an entire department of what they called merge engineers with a merge manager that had to go through and fix, because they kept cloning and modifying products and then trying to merge it back into each base, every cross base from product 6 to 1 if they made a change. And then, say they made a change in product 5 and it was a bug, to propagate it out to the other products. They had to have an entire department of people with titles called merge engineers, a merge manager, merge engineering manager. Like, this is the kind of stuff you run into or can run into without it. And it was taking them up to a month to prepare and deploy their products, and they didn't even have 6 products. They only had like half of this. They had like 3. And they called myself in and 1 or 2 other MVPs, and they're like, can you fix this? This is ASP.NET. And I said, look, I can fix your ASP.NET part, but this is also tied into your source code control, which is where the merge stuff came in. Those people worked mostly merging through source code control. I said, you actually need somebody to work on that as well. Right? So now you need high fancy pants consultants to come in just to get this under control. Right, because the chaos monkeys are in there just messing up everything. You couldn't make a change at all without all sorts of disturbances. It was crazy. So we don't want to run into that, and it gets out of control really quickly when you are working with these kind of things. All right, so yeah, little bugs, right? Little bug flies in, or the other kind of bugs. So different kind of bugs to control in the different products. Also, very difficult. And is it a bug in the base, or is it in one of those little added features, or a feature that's modified? Because we'll take a look in the next couple slides. There's going to be like a base of functionality, but then also the functionality that varies between the products. And you have to be able to manage both of those things, and the defects that happen in both of those things. And you have multiple products to think about. So just thinking about this is kind of exhausting, right? So we need frameworks to help us, or something to help us do this. So now you have an idea of how it is to work at JetBrains. We don't do this. We don't do the clone and own. We have a really nice way of doing it. So it works really good, and we could get things out to market. And we have a really great schedule that we're able to stick to with 4 rollouts a year. And so works out really great. But I've seen too many products like this, especially in insurance, that they just keep just breeding products. And no, like stick to a core and then reuse the core and add features on. So the product line way, I have this core or base, or JetBrains, we call it a platform. In automotive industry, they call it a platform. You'll hear about the Toyota platform or the Honda platform, etc. So we have our platform, and then we also have little features as well. So for us, like our platform would be what's called the core of the platform. We have a PSI, or program structure interface. Then we have the project model. So that's working with opening files. It doesn't matter if it's a Java file or a C# file or whatever, just the fact that the editor can open this file. Then after that, it loads it up and it gives you an abstract syntax tree, right? And then of course, that's where the language kind of comes into play. Is it for Java or C#? Because we want to create editor specific things at that point. But up until then, just file open, file save, all the VCS stuff like GitHub, debugging, the basics of debugging. Once you start walking through the code, then it varies a little bit. But we do have these core pieces that are available. And then with them, a couple of variated features. From that, we actually reuse that whole platform. And then say I'm making Ruby mine, right? Then I can put in, Ruby IDE and Ruby, maybe like a Ruby MVC or something like that, right? So different things to work with Ruby. And then I could come over here and I could have Rider, right? So I could have C# and F# and things that are specific to .NET. And then I can have this other one with different features altogether. And as you can see, right, I might have exactly the same, whatever the star feature represents in these 2 products, but maybe not in the third. Maybe it's a little different in the third, or not at all in the third. For example, if you have, say, a ternary operator in most JetBrains products, and you do an Alt-Enter, which is our cool little shortcut to bring up a little pop-up to help you write better code, and it does, and it'll say, hey, do you want to convert this ternary to an if statement? Or also, if you have an if statement, it will say the opposite. It'll say, do you want to convert this if statement to a ternary? So it'll let you know that you could do those things. Well, maybe these 2 products have it, like Java and .NET, But if I go to GoLand, they don't have that operator, so I might not have that. Right, so I might have features in some and not in the other, or a little bit different. But here, I'm just reusing a whole pile of assets, a whole entire product, and then using some techniques to be able to do what's called variations and make variances from those products. And then this way, if there's a bug in one of these, say somewhere in my core, there's a bug everywhere. Once I squash the bug, it's gone. I don't have to worry about the bug lingering in that product or in this product. The only time I would have that concern is if there's a very product-specific feature that is not available in the other products. Then obviously, if it's only available to that product, like the C# interactive would obviously only be available in Writer, right? So that one I would not have to worry if there's a bug, if it's seeping out to the other products. So single systems versus product line. Single systems focus on a product, but the product line focuses on the whole base, the whole platform. The single system focuses on reusability at the component level and as a development strategy. But with a product line, your reusability is a business strategy, which is very different if you think about it. This is all about market segments. And in the case of an IDE, those market segments might be Ruby devs, .NET devs, Go devs, Java devs, right? So they're my different market segments. Just like in insurance, I might have homeowners insurance and maybe pet insurance or these other market segments, business insurance. It's all insurance, but it's different kind of insurance. So market needs are what drives the reusability. Wherein just standard old engineering, reusability is usually governed by making that reusable component as a development technique and a development strategy, as opposed to backing up and aligning the business as a whole. So that's where it's different. Now, in the product line, you're also going to do reusability as a development strategy. That doesn't mean that goes out the door. We still need to do that because that's just good programming. But we also need to manage reusability at that product level and managing the variations per product. So an example, an online market, something similar to like Shopify. So I put my market out there, and I worked at did a contract for a while, and this was in early ASP.NET days, but they could have used product line strategies for this. They had a B2B marketplace for aftermarket automotive parts. So after you buy your car, you could buy the little fuzzy dice or extra tint for your windows or any kind of stuff to put on your car or make your car different after you bought a new car. And they had a little marketplace, and this was actually a very large company in the US that did most of the aftermarket automotive work in the US. So they had a little marketplace, and they had a storefront, you had a shopping cart and a wish list and point of sale where you can put in a credit card and purchase things out of your shopping cart. And they decided they wanted this marketplace to be for businesses, but different types of businesses. So some would be your automotive stores where people can just walk into the store and buy stuff off the shelves, and that they could use this product in place of their cash registers or to purchase more, so either or. And then also for certain companies to buy online, just directly through this company, and then for some other types. So they had a couple different market segments there that the same basic product needed. Well, instead of doing a product line, they built this giant monolithic ASP.NET Web Forms app. Like I could just stop right there, right? I said ASP.NET Web Forms app. Like that's kind of bad enough. I did web forms, but I've seen people make some really nice web forms apps, but this was not one of them. And they just did horrible, abusive things to this. And it was this is one giant, it was so bad that their classes had tens of thousands of lines. And it was all like if-then statements. And they were just pulling gunk out of the query string and parsing it to see, well, if it's this market segment, why don't we render this stuff? And if it's that market segment, why don't we render that? When what they could have done is done a base marketplace and then added on components to it and strategically thought about it. But instead, they just kind of went in there and just, started throwing code at everything, and it didn't quite work. But what they might do is, if they were to make a product line, have that same marketplace platform, and then just some variations, maybe within the point of sale. Instead of a wish list, maybe a recurring purchase for those retail outlets, right, that wanted to do that. And, maybe accepting purchase orders or different kinds of cash and stuff like that. So instead, they did one giant product for everybody. And then, as you might imagine, because the code was not loosely coupled, right? And not even just because it was web forms, it was just terrible. And anytime they made a change to one thing, it affected 10 different things. So trying to hunt down bugs was just an enormous headache all of the time. So, this would have helped them, this kind of reuse at the product level. So those are some just general notes of product lines. Product lines, you'll find the most information in the academic space. So here are some formal and pedantic methodologies from there. You know what? You actually don't need to use any of these. We don't use these at JetBrains, and as far as I know, Microsoft's not using them. But when I worked at Microsoft before, but I wasn't on the Visual Studio team, so I don't know. And I just never asked anybody. But there is one called Pulse, or Product Line Software Engineering. SEI has a project from Carnegie Mellon about this. There's a BAPO model. And at the end of this talk, I have a couple of books that outline these. But if you go searching for this, you'll find a lot of academic papers and a lot of formal methodologies that, talk about, they even go back to talking about, well, should we adhere to CMMI? No, just don't. You don't need to do that unless you have to already because you work at Boeing or something. But generally, you can just make patterns to make sure that you consider reuse as part of your already in process methodologies that you use for modeling. So, and I find fewer developers are modeling things and doing formal modeling. That's kind of falling out of fashion in a lot of areas, not everybody though. So if you use modeling, then that's great. You can actually model right along with the modeling that you already do. If you're using, Agile, that's fine. If you're still using waterfall, that fits in there too, right? So any kind of standard, popular, traditional engineering tactic you might use, you can use software product lines with. If you want formal engineering practices for software line engineering on top of those, these are the ones to have, and you'll find them in academia. So the basics of how we would go about doing this to design your product line. Well, first, you need to figure out if your product really requires a product family or a product line. Do you have a significant amount of reusable base? So we make IDEs at JetBrains, so yes, we do. All of the common menus, the tool windows, the fact that you can edit code files, what the code is doesn't matter right now, but the fact that you can do that, like all of those things are common to an IDE. So yeah, that would make a great product family. Insurance, like I said, insurance make a great product family. Medical stuff, there's a lot in medicine that's highly reusable as well. So you have to sit and think, does it make sense? If it does, then the two main pieces of this are to figure out what's called a commonality, and that is your platform or your base, right? So stuff that is going to show up exactly the same across all of your products. So we have to figure out those. And then we can design the variabilities. And here's where you can kind of like commonalities you could just use with your regular old requirements. So maybe you actually do like use cases and UML. Maybe you don't. Maybe you just do text-based requirements, or you just jot down stuff on a napkin. Whatever you do, commonalities can go in there. Variabilities, you can actually use a small modeling technique that will help disperse them across the line and give you a good picture of what's happening. So you can design the variabilities, and that works in tandem with if you're already using UML or some DDD or any of that. This fits right in with it. So it shouldn't be too clunky or anything, just to kind of dovetail it in with your already existing ways of doing things. So commonalities, same across all the products. For example, with this get menu, you will see in exactly all of our products. Right? So once you say yes, I'll enable get, that's what you get. Same thing with the commit window. It's the same commit window. It might be a different file in here, but it's the same commit window. It's the exact same code. We didn't rewrite it. We didn't clone it and then customize it. It is the same. So Pro, it gives you nice same look and feel. Right? However, we have themes. So if the user themes over it, then it might look different. But that's not code. That's just a customization at the end that the user does. But it's going to be same, the commonalities. So this is just like a regular old signal system product, the commonalities. Then we get to the variances or variabilities. So here's where it's going to integrate with your popular design methodologies. And what you could do is maybe you're using UML or some sort of object-oriented design. You can then make what's called a variability model, and that can run alongside of your UML or your other design artifacts. A couple of terms from variability. This is from the Pedantic academic literature. Your variability subject is that thing that you want to scatter across the products, and it's going to be a little bit different. So that's your subject. So in my case, this might be something like one of those little tooltips or intentions. The variability object is the particular instance of it. So which product does what, how it's a little different. The variation point is where it varies, and the variant itself is that representation of it. So to put this in picture in another slide, first we'll take a look at these steps to doing it. We have to identify what we want to vary. So I'll use an example from the JetBrains lines using Alt-Enter to do a little intention action. So we need to identify the thing we want to vary. Then we need to define where that's going to vary, and then that variant itself. So first off, the variability. In IntelliJ, if I have a very simple class and I just have a private field and I'm starting to build a class, and I decide, oh, I want to make this a property, so I need getters and setters. If I press Alt-Enter in IntelliJ, it pops up this little menu where I could do the create getter and setter, or individual ones, or remove it and other stuff. But let's just focus on just the create getter and setter. If I go over to WebStorm and I do an Alt-Enter, I get basically the same stuff. I don't get, now it's not about the menu here, it's about this option in the menu, right? So the menu itself also is a variant, right, or a variability. But here where I can add the Java doc to it, right, for a little bit of documentation and some of the other options. Well, in WebStorm, I don't need that, right? But in WebStorm, I also have this, create getter and setter. Same thing in Rider, except Rider calls it encapsulate field, and it gives me a whole bunch of other stuff in here as well. So both the UI, the menu itself varies, but to look at this one option in it, the encapsulate field or create getter setter, because these actually generate code, which is why I want to show them, those are also a variability. So it's that Same overarching functionality, but it varies, right? So the point is, the variation point here would be in each of these products, when I do an Alt-Enter, this is my variation point. So I can just say that it is a point in each product. Then, if I want to model it, I can do that here by using this little notation of a triangle, and I have variation point, and I could say, well, we call this an intention action whenever you press Alt-Enter and you get a cool little pop-up and you see the light bulb, right? The nice little light bulbs here that you see in all of these. Whenever you see that light bulb, it's called an intention action. So you see the light bulb, you press Alt-Enter, and you get cool stuff you can do. Well, one of these cool things is your getter-setter. So this is my getter-setter intention action. That's the variability point. At that point, if I'm in Java and if I click on that, or if I arrow down and press enter on that, in Java, in IntelliJ, that's going to make Java code, and WebStorm, JavaScript or TypeScript, and in Rider, it's going to create C# or some other kind of code, maybe VB.NET or something like that. But before it does that in Rider, it pops up a little dialog to give me extra options, such as, do I only want to do the getter or setter? And do I want to make it like the Lambda style or the classic style? Because we have a few more options in .NET. So that's a variation point in each one of these variants. So when I have things like use cases and other diagrams, if I add these alongside of the diagrams, it gives a more complete picture of how those components work across the whole system, the whole platform, or the whole line. So this is a small example, and these can get complex pretty quick, but you can keep them at an even higher level, right? So I could just say intention actions, and I could go, very deep in the object hierarchy, but I don't have to. So it's kind of up to you if you decide to do this modeling, how exactly and what level you do it. But as an example, this is kind of what it would look like. And then you could use other notation like this little arc to say, well, it's going to be different in each of these products. However, if I filled this in, it would say, like, I can only have this feature in one of these products, but not the others. So there's some notations to variability modeling that if you're going to formally use it, that you can. If we go to take a look at that modeling and we want to start applying a little bit of this, and we'll look at a little bit of code later as well. We can take a look at, we'll start with greenfield lines and we'll come to brownfield later. So where I might do this modeling is, again, from the pedantic academic literature, most literatures break it down into the domain engineering and application engineering phase, otherwise known as requirements and writing the code, right? So in the requirements and the planning phases, that's where you would do your modeling if you're going to do variation modeling, right? So you might do it alongside of the requirements. You would design your commonalities, and that's going to be across all of your products, and that's plain old requirements. Then your variances, which is where you might use the model from the previous slide, and that's your product individuation, right? So then I could say, look, I have this common base, and now I know that each intention is going to work different in each product. And when they open a file in .NET, it could be C# or VB or F#, but when they open it in Java, it could be Java, or IntelliJ, it could be Java, but it might also be Kotlin, right? Because Kotlin's supported there. So that's where I might define those when I'm doing product planning. So domain engineering or product planning. Then when you're writing the code, you take your requirements and you apply them like you normally would, except we're remembering that this is for the reuse of the platform, the common requirements. And then the variances, what we could do is set them in their own little space. And we do this at JetBrains with the plugin model, which I'll get to in a minute. So you could set them in their own little space, kind of sitting on top of the platform. And here's where I start to think of it as Legos. We have the platform, and then on top of it, you put some Legos, and you put some more Legos, and you put more Legos, and pretty soon you've built a thing, and that's your editor. It's full of Legos. So this has given me an idea for JetBrains swag. It should be more Lego oriented, I think. So we use plugins. You don't have to use plugins. You don't have to call it plugins. You could call it extension points also, but we have both. So plugin model works quite nicely. So also extension points. So I have that platform. Maybe not everything needs to be a plugin. Maybe there are some places where I might have tiny things to add in. You can have extension points, or extension points where you extend the common features so it will be identical across all the lines. The variances are the differences in each one. When we're programming, we use inheritance also. This is classic OOP. This is not anything new. Actually, nothing on this slide is new, right? Inheritance, we already use that, but that's something you use when you're considering, how am I going to use this? Am I going to have that Alt-Enter intention? And then how's that going to work in these other products? Well, I'm going to inherit and then override some functionality. So it's, standard polymorphism going on there. Also, we use dependency injection. In the Pompous academic literature, I don't see much about this, and I'm kind of surprised. So I either just didn't get to it, or people aren't writing about it, but we have drop-in points in our code base where if we're writing something for the common platform, we just drop it in and, right, it's just injected in all of the products. We also use a few aspects. Now, this is a .NET group, and you're going, aspects. Yeah. So our products are written in Java, right? So this does exist for .NET. It's just that nobody gives a crap about it, right? But you can use aspect-oriented programming and use aspects for cross-cutting concerns to work your line as well. In addition, some configuration. So we do things like, if you take a look at some of our toolkits, we have an XML file where you can create a plugin, and then that plugin, you can determine what other plugins go to the plugin. Being a very Lego-like system, the JetBrains line in particular, so we have our base, and then we have plugins. Plugins could be a tiny feature, like a little menu extension, or a little, somebody did a little rubber duck progress bar, and just a little duck goes across the screen, just a tiny little thing. It could be a tiny thing, but it could be a whole plugin, but the plugin could be a whole product. And that product can have other plugins because it is platformception at JetBrains. So if you think about it, some of our line actually works like this, like IntelliJ includes WebStorm as a plugin, and WebStorm is an actual product. And WebStorm has plugins, like a TypeScript plugin. Therefore, IntelliJ gets TypeScript. That was just weird and circular sounding, but it works, right? And in this way, we don't have to rewrite code, right? We get this ultimate reusability. So also ultimate confusion for people listening to me talk about this, right? But yeah, so we could have plugins that have plugins that have plugins, and on and on. So when we load up all the editors, though, we know enough not to load a plugin 6 times just because it was plugged into a whole bunch of different products. That's one thing you have to consider. So here's what our platform looks like. We actually have the platform. And then from it, all of these share the code, including MPS, which is our metaprogramming system. Like, how meta is that, right? Not just metaprogramming, but that it's also in a platform. But we have the second platform, the ReSharper platform. So ReSharper, which is a plugin to Visual Studio, also powers Rider. So Rider is powered by ReSharper, but also WebStorm is included in Rider, and of course IntelliJ. So it shares from 2 product lines, because at JetBrains, 1 isn't enough. We need 2, right? So platformception again. So Rider gets like all the things in it. And that's our 2 platforms that we have. So what it does is Rider uses the UI because you could tell it's more like IntelliJ. All of that from IntelliJ, but it uses some of the code and .NET services from Rider, some microservices that are behind the scenes that it uses to communicate with Visual Studio. So that's where it pulls from both lines. So now this is a bit elaborate. If you're making a product line, you probably don't want to start a second line and then have them merging and all of that. This can only happen after many years of architecture and abuse that we like to do. So for our software product line, we have, of course, IntelliJ is our base platform. Right? So we have what we call the base platform as part of that, and our project structure interface, which means we could use with the abstract syntax trees to do editing and Alt-Enter and check and see if your syntax is correct and all of that good stuff, format your code, etc. The project model, working with projects and files, all of your features and cool stuff, things like debugging and common IDE stuff. Then we have a bunch of plugins on top of it. So we have all this base plus the plugins. Now, if we take a look at some code here with this plugin model, so here it's the same thing, like IntelliJ, like I mentioned before, has WebStorm, and IntelliJ on top of this base platform makes IntelliJ. WebStorm has a bunch of plugins. Rider has plugins plus these other plugins. Right? So plugins plus plugins. So if you want to make a plugin, you can take what we have is this cool little plugin template, and then take that template, which kind of represents or has access to the base platform, and then add your code to it. And I'll show an example of this. We have what's called the conditional operator, and I mentioned this before. So this little plugin, when I do Alt-Enter on the if statement, it might say, if it's an applicable if statement, it'll say, hey, it would be shorter as a ternary operator. You want to change that? And if I say yes, it'll do it. And if I do Alt-Enter on a ternary, it'll convert it to an if statement if I go ahead and press Enter. But you see the way that we're working this here is we have a class, and it's called conditional operator converter. And it extends something out of that PSI, which is the main way of working with the abstract syntax trees, right? The program elements. So the PSI element base intention action, and also implements intention action. Now this is Java, but this is basically doing the same stuff you would expect in .NET. Then in here, a bunch of code, to check and see what it should do. It has to get the text. It has to see, what the operator is doing. I get some nice coding or comments in here to see what's going on.
Rachel, are we supposed to be seeing your code at the moment?
Oh, yes, you are.
Thank you, Stefan.
Yes, thanks. Let's see. So I thought if I was sharing the whole screen, I guess not. Let's just move to that. How about now?
Yep, there you go.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Thank you. You might want to zoom in a bit.
Sorry, I'll start back in here. Let's see.
You might want to zoom in a little bit.
Okay, let's see. Maybe do that a little bit.
I mean, it's not too bad. I can read it, but yeah, that's a little bit better. Thank you.
A little bit better. Okay. Yeah, I think there's a little lag here with the zoom, and then also not realizing that you weren't seeing the code. So I'll start back here again. So here's my class. So what we're doing is we're using inheritance to take out of the framework and create a variant that's going to be different in some of the products. Actually, with the ternary operator, really everybody's got the same syntax. It's not that fun. Like the getter and setter, which generates some different Java code, or different Java code versus .NET versus JavaScript. But here, I have my conditional operator converter. It extends one of the PSI elements, the base intention action. So that's where your Alt-Enter comes from. That's the base class for that. Also, this intention action. So these are what you would expect in .NET as well, extends and implements, doing the same kind of stuff here. Right, so I'm taking those pieces, inheriting them out of my base framework, and then, some code to actually work with that and make that happen. So here are checks to see, is it a Java token? What's going on here? All right, so we don't have to go through all of the code to see, this is not a whole lot. So I could take this and I have, let's see, well, we're up to like 200, right, maybe 200 lines of code here. And all this does is it works with those PSI elements, like the expression statement and reference expressions. So these are all just working with that syntax tree that you get of what would be a representation of everything inside of your code editor. And you don't even have to know a lot about abstract syntax trees or those kind of algorithms. All you need to know is, hey, you have these PSI elements to work with. They represent stuff in the tree. I could take them. I could see what this is. Is it an if or a ternary? And do I want to switch it around? And you write the code for it and off you go. So here I've added, there's another 200 lines, and this could count as a plugin. And all the plugin is when you press Alt Enter, if it happens to be on that if, it'll give you a little pop-up asking if you want to convert it, or vice versa. So this tiny little plugin, which is not packaged and sold as a plugin, it's simply added to products when you purchase them. So it's not like you could just go to plugins and say, add this plugin for me. No, it's just part of the packaging. So that's something else you'll have to consider as part of your product line architecting, right? You'll have a set of required plugins that you want to use, and ones that you'll let people add on maybe as a plugin, because I could just go to plugins in any of the products and then pick what plugins I want. And there are some that they won't even show up in here because they're just simply required, right? So such as being able to edit Java code in IntelliJ, it's kind of required. So it's in here, and that's it. You get it, and you can't tell it you don't want it, right? Being able to edit .NET, C# and .NET files, F# in Writer. You get that in Writer. You can't say you don't want it, right? That's kind of the point of the product. So those are required. So you would figure out, if you're using a plugin model, which ones should be required like this and just used as little Legos on top of the framework, and then which ones would be packaged as a plugin otherwise. And we do both, right? And then we also have a marketplace where, if you create something like this, maybe you wanted to create a fancy conditional operator that, makes a little, throw some confetti on the screen every time you switch from a ternary to an if statement. You can do that, and you can put it on the marketplace and sell it as a plugin. I'd be impressed if you got people to buy it, but nonetheless, you can do that, right? So you can have plugins as an individual product that is a plugin, or as a product like WebStorm itself as part of IntelliJ. So that's why we could do JavaScript and TypeScript in here. So I run back to the slides. Let's see. Here we go. All right, so that's our a plugin model and a little bit of the code. Now that code was made with this base template, and here's a link here. It's all on GitHub. All of our code is open source, so we're very open. So the IntelliJ product is up there on GitHub. This plugin template, so you could do like a file new in IntelliJ, tell it to open this template, and then modify some files, add some code, and off you go, right? So you've made yourself a plugin or possibly a product. So you can use this plugin model and the template to do that yourself as well, and even for products to sell. So JetBrains wasn't always like this, though. Around 2008 is when this happened. Before that, it was just IntelliJ by itself as a single product. And then at some point, the CEO was like, hey, there's other languages and we can make some money here. But what do? Like, we don't want to take our product, copy, and do the clone and own, because that's going to get us in trouble. So what they did was they restructured everything so it looks like it does today, with the platform, the PSI, and the project model. And if you look at Visual Studio, extending Visual Studio, it's a very similar concept, different terms. I think they use the word platform as well, but a lot of extending Visual Studio works in a very similar way as well. But once they did this massive restructuring from a single product to rip out and put what would be now a platform base, and then some little Legos on top, and then actual plugins, then the first real thing, like we already had IntelliJ, but then the first product in the line, if you will, because IntelliJ kind of stayed part of the base for a while after this, was RubyMine. And then other products were added, and they never got around to refactoring. And if you look, there's a couple of recent blog posts right around the time of the 2023 release, because IntelliJ was still in the platform. So it actually wasn't a plugin yet. And they pulled most of that out, the Java specific stuff. And there's one or two little bits left, but most of it's been pulled out. So having those little bits in there in the first place made it not so loosely coupled, and did give a little bit of grief when you had to do cross-language, certain cross-language tasks when you're working with an IDE. So now that that's decoupled, things should go a lot smoother now. And the cool thing is, like, we released this, this was all internal. Nobody noticed, except for the fact that we blogged about it. Like, nobody really would have known. There was not a whole lot of bugs. They've been through this before. They've gone through the whole restructuring. So it went off quite nicely. But we've gone through this already a couple of times, going from, single product to a line, and then going back and pulling out another product from that later. So that happened. So that's a little bit more difficult than if you get to start out thinking about product lines from the beginning. Okay? So it's much more difficult. If you're migrating, the same thing, because more people are going to have code out there now, and you might have to migrate. But your same engineering practices, right? Your same stuff that you're using, your same modeling and requirements, these will fit in the same way, even if you're migrating. It's just that you have to think about ripping stuff apart and restructuring and refactoring a lot. Now, the problem there is that you might end up doing a lot of this code to restructure while you're not adding new features, which is kind of a business issue, right? You need those new features to keep customers, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to weigh, what's more important, and what, little by little with each version, what pieces you can rip out to make as a platform or part of your base. And then to decide which are the variabilities, or which will be when you're taking apart the Legos to put them back together, right? So this could be a project in and of itself, right? And that's, the IntelliJ team already had a lot of patterns and workflows going already, so they kind of knew how to do this. But if it's your first go around, it might be a little bit more difficult to restructure and refactor, split your code base to make it a platform plus plugins or other products. So that's what you do if you're migrating. If you can start out greenfield, but we always don't get that, right? Unfortunately, it's not always file new project. So I did all the, you can only go so far in like an hour or so, but this should get everybody started on, what product lines are, where they could benefit you, and some techniques to get started on them. Here are some very good resources for them. Some different, this one with the foundations, principles, techniques, goes through every part of the life cycle, from the domain engineering and requirements down to the application writing, your code and everything. It's a pretty big book. And then also this one, In Action, has several case studies and shows you how a lot of other companies did it and some of the different ways that they've managed to make product lines. So it's really great when they have all the case studies like that. So there's some good resources for that. And they refer back to some of the things on the other slides that I mentioned. So that's all I have. And I think that should get everybody started. And I guess it's questions now, and I can stop with the screen sharing.
Thank you very much, Rachel. That's fantastic. So how the sausage was made, to a degree.
Lots of grinding, yeah.
That's excellent. Obviously, everyone feel free to come off mute and ask questions, or put it in the chat if you don't feel comfortable doing that, and we'll ask it for you. But yeah, thank you very much. That was awesome. Thank you.
Would you be happy to share the slides and the resources links after this, Rachel?
Yes, sure.
Amazing, thank you. Just checking the chat. I haven't seen many questions, mostly requests for Clippy plugins, and half of them are for me.
Well, everybody likes Clippy more now. Clippy's like out of the product than we did before, right?
I'm going to have to 3D print a Clippy, I think. I've already found him on Thingiverse, so I'm going to have to do that. Maybe IoTify him as well.
I'll tell you, Clippy is way more hilarious on Twitter than he was when he was in office.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
Just saying.
Like that.
Problem is, now got to the stage where I mention Clippy to anyone on my team and they're too young to know what I'm talking about.
I know, you feel very old.
Any of the computers I used as a kid.
People here is anybody here using something or building something like a product line? Do you see, are you looking here going, this thing at work, we could do this. Is anybody thinking this way, or is everybody have single systems, or what's going on with everybody?
Been handy in past projects, but not where I'm currently working.
So, somewhere you see this also as embedded systems. Anybody working on embedded systems? There's a lot of this in embedded systems.
Yeah, I work in embedded systems, but I'm a consultant, so I don't work on the same embedded system from job to job. But yeah, absolutely, you could do that. Feature switch is sort of a basic way of doing some of that as well, isn't it? But it's kind of not the same. I realize, but that would be sort of more likely what I would choose to a degree, and keep a single code base and then feature switch people's stuff on and off. Easier when you've got the cloud as well, I guess, because a lot of the services are actually in the cloud rather than on the device. But
right, yeah, unless you run into the problem of that one place that I was at with the B2B Automart stuff, where you get to this point to where there's so many feature switches, like there has to be a capacity, like a cap, where you get to this many switches, you have to do something different. But if you only have a handful of things, that's perfectly fine, right? Yeah. That works just great.
I suppose that at that point you haven't got a product suite either, really. You've got options in your products rather than a product suite. So I suppose that speaks to exactly what you just said. Maybe there's a delineation at a point in time when you reach too many feature switches and you go, damn it, we're going to need new products rather than new features.
Right. Oh, yeah. So here's a question. Do I believe the product line technique that I described is generally widely adopted, or have found most organizations use the copy clone method, or do I find it happens more in one industry than another? No, I don't see it necessarily widely adopted. I see it adopted a little bit everywhere. Not everybody is talking using the terms I am, like software product lines. Like even at JetBrains, a lot of people would not use the term, well, we're software product line engineering. No, they just talk about our products or the family, right? Although technically product family is a term from that too. There are industries that are more than others, such as the embedded systems you see a lot. Aerospace, Boeing, like everybody who makes an airplane or a flying thingy, they've got this going. Cars got this going. And they all have firmware, right? So they're doing it with hardware and firmware as well. So those you see it quite a bit. I think that there are a lot of your regular kind of forms over data, your regular business system. A lot of them are clone and own or a feature switch, in which they're getting to that limit of features where they could switch over even internally to make product lines. Like maybe your benefits system, could be done in a product line, if you're in the USA, the way that they do it. So things like that. So it really depends. I think there's a lot more folks could use it, and they don't realize that it's a thing and that they could architect for reusability at a much bigger level than they already do.
Any more questions? You've blinded them all with science. Excellent. Well, I mean, if everybody wants to take a couple of minutes break and go and fill your glass up and nip to the loo or whatever it is you need to do, then do feel free to do that and then come back. But I mean, we're just going to keep the call open now until everybody drifts off. So yeah, thank you again for that, Rachel. That was really good. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm out on Twitter and whatnot, so I'm pretty easy to find. So, if anybody comes up with questions later or, wants to talk about this or, I don't care, any kind of .NET topic or whatever, I'm out there. So pretty easy to find.
So the plugin store, how busy is that, and what's the turnover like for that sort of thing, if that's public information, and I know nothing about it.
I don't actually know what the turnover is. We do have a pretty decent store, and there's a lot of stuff, and the stuff ranges from like absurd, right, or like adorably absurd, like little rubber ducky thing, right? That's adorable. It's absurd, but like or stuff like whenever you type and certain programming constructs, one of them does actually throw confetti on the screen. I'm like, come on now, right? But for certain things, I suppose that's fun. When your boss walks by or something, surely that's what you want going on the screen.
Uh-huh.
But there are like actual serious plugins as well, that help with everything from helping you out with like DDD, or there's a really nice one, Plant UML, so you can actually make UML for the last 3 people who still use UML. Where you can create those diagrams, or lots of, or actually one of our somebody on my team, Matthias, made Nuke, which is a continuous integration and build and deployment tool. So it kind of competes with the stuff from Microsoft and also Cake and the other stuff. So actual hardcore tools as well. Oddly, we also have Team City, which does some of this too. So we have multiple plugins, with different features like that too. So we have, or another one, one of my other teammates made the Azure Toolkit, which is freaking fantastic. Because I can do anything, make my Azure functions there. I can manage my assets and, throw out a Docker container. So, those kind of things are very helpful, those kind of plugins. So we have a lot that our own people make, and there's some third parties make. Also third-party IDEs like the Android Studio, that's actually based off of our product line. That's what that is. That's IntelliJ for Android when you think about it.
Yeah.
There's also an IDE called Comma for the Raku language. I've never touched this language. I just know it exists. There's also several other small IDEs for very obscure languages where people are like, we kind of need an IDE for this DSL that we have. But building an IDE is such a pain in the ass, right? So they're like, we know what we'll use JetBrains, so then we can build our own IDE. So they've done that. There's also a Rust. One of our IntelliJ people went off and made a Rust IDE / plugin. So you'll see. So we pop up in the wild quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, we've seen the success of Rider, and that is growing and growing and growing in popularity. In fact, people who are streaming seem to use it quite a lot as well, oddly. So that's helping with drive that popularity. I know quite a few streamers that are using that JetBrains Rider, and people prefer that to Visual Studio. So there's obviously quite a lot of work going on in that product. Yeah.
Rider is really, it's an awesome product. And that actually comes from the 2 product lines. So that's a little interesting .NET stepchild there.
Yeah, exactly. How do you find, because obviously you will be behind in some of the feature set with Rider inherently, because you're not developing that part of the product, but you will be ahead in swathes. And how do you find working? I guess there must be some collaboration with Microsoft somewhere along the line, and do you find them stealing your ideas, and do you then have to steal theirs? Or
well, with Rider, it's not that so much we're ever behind. Actually, it is the opposite. Microsoft steals a lot of stuff from us.
I bet.
But ReSharper being a plugin to Visual Studio, ReSharper, sometimes we have no choice, but we are constrained by some of the technical implementations of Microsoft. So that, but, if there's a constraint in ReSharper that we wanted to put something in Writer and can't, then we can just usurp that and put it in Writer.
Mm-hmm.
And we can come back later and join them later. We're also working on moving ReSharper out of process, because being physically constrained with the process boundaries of Visual Studio means that Visual Studio gets to bully ReSharper, and it kind of does. And then, ReSharper is kind of literally boxed in. So they're moving it out of process, and then performance is going to get a lot better, because then it's just some quick and easy calls, right? Even though generally you're taught cross-boundary calls are bad, trying to work in the constraint where Visual Studio keeps just taking your memory away from you is even worse. So moving that out of process, once we do that, then the constraints will not be there. It's not going to be so much of an issue. I'm sure there will be something, but most of them are going to be gone. So.
There's a lot of love for Rider in the chat.
Oh yes, push for Rider. So yes, if you're having conversations about switching to Rider and you need somebody to help convince your boss person to do that, hit me up. I will help you out.
Swag. If you send them Lego swag, that'll do it.
Like I said before before I started the talk, I can send it over to the UK, and then you'll have to pay an import tax of like 30 euros on a couple stickers.
Yeah, you might as well just go buy it yourself.
I think it might be cheaper for us to go to Germany.
At that point. Yeah.
How did on that particular note? I mean, I've still got a bunch of JetBrains stickers, so I don't need to worry about JetBrains stickers for a little while. Although I think the most popular ones have gone. Are we going to run into trouble asking for JetBrains sticker swag in the future on that?
Actually, I think the sticker swag comes from the UK, because remember, it came from the UK and went to Hattie, and he had to pay the 30 euros
That's good.
To get into Spain. So I think the stickers actually come from there, but we'll figure something out.
That'll be all right. Absolutely.
We got a couple of advocates living over there, and I think they got a couple of boxes of stickers.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we don't need them at the moment because,
My old workmates used to try and find the ones with their initials. So if you could make something with JW, that'd be great.
Good. All right, I'm going to go and get myself a new drink and say goodnight to the kids and do all of those things, and then I'll be back shortly. But do stick around and ask more questions and chat and all of those things. And obviously, if you don't and you're not here when I'm back, then bye.
I'm probably going to take off soon too, so I'll just say bye to you now, Pete.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for that. Next month, don't forget, we've got Myra. I don't know if it's Wenzel or Wenzel, I think it's got to be Wenzel.
It's Wenzel, yeah.
Good. Yeah, I was saying that, and then I thought while I was saying it that I might be wrong. So anyway, good. Thank you for helping me with that. So that's going to be awesome. She's going to be talking about the .NET website architecture. So it's going to be cool to listen to how they eat their own dog food. Cool. All right. Thank you very much, Rachel. I'll see you again soon, hopefully. Well, no doubt I'll be in touch anyway. And certainly if you're going to be over at some point, then do let me and Jess know.
Yes. Yeah, when we're allowed out of the house again.
Yeah. You'll come over here and you'll have to stay in a hotel, though, for like 10 nights before you can even leave that quarantine hotel type idea.
Hotels.
I can't remember hotels.
I remember those things.
I
remember taking the tube in the sky and you go to the other place and they have a bed there. It's, oh, wow, so different. Yeah. That's in the before time.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So see you in a bit. I'll leave you with capable hands of Jess anyway. See you in a moment.
Okay.
In a minute.
Well, when was the last time you traveled, Rachel?
So it was literally right before the shit hit the fan. I went to Svedag conference in Sweden, and I was there, let's see, was it February? Yeah, it was sometime in February last year. And right before I left, I got a terrible sore throat and I got laryngitis. And then right after that, we started hearing about COVID. And then I was like, is that it? Except I didn't hear about anything with throat symptoms and laryngitis. And that's all it was. I never got a chest anything. So I could not actually give the presentation because I couldn't talk. I literally couldn't speak. So I sat there in the hotel drinking lemon tea for a day and a half and then went home. And that was the last thing I did before lockdown. And I'm like, oh, geez, this stinks.
Maybe enough to put you off at the best of times.
Right. And I normally do like get such a fun time at that conference and stuff. And no, not that time. And then that was the last thing. So.
How long have you been living in Germany now?
For 2 years now, maybe 2.5 years.
Really? Wow, that's gone by fast.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Haven't got the snow we've got though.
No, we got nothing. So just like little flakes and they don't stick, and that's it. Oddly warm winters, so, and oddly cool summers. So
Right.
You city centre now, Jess?
Sorry?
You city centre now, Jess?
Yeah.
Got the proper snow?
Yeah, proper snow. I'll put a photo up later.
oh yeah, you sent that photo before. Yeah, you got nice proper snow.
Yeah, we've got a proper one this year.
I'm originally from Pennsylvania, so I'm used to like gobs and gobs of snow constantly all winter, like that crust of snow that does not go away for 3 months. And I'm like, I thought they got that here. Usually they do, but not
That's
now.
funny because I think since I live in the southern part of England, we got a little bit of snow yesterday, but it was gone within an hour, which actually reminded me of home back in Colorado, where we can get 2 feet of snow on Monday and have blistering sunny weather on Tuesday.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, and then a flood the day after that because of all the snow melts so quickly.
Yeah, pretty much.
I feel for the kids though, because for us it would have been a snow day and we would have got off school, but they got no excuse now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's just cruel, isn't it?
Poor kids.
That is something I've had to get used to since moving over here because, like Rachel, I remember going to school in 10 feet of snow and they didn't care. They were like, go to school. You come over here and there's a small frost and the world just stops. The trains stop, public transportation stops, school, work, it's all canceled. It's like, it's just snow, people.
Yeah, good times.
Our trains can't even cope with a leaf on the track. UK's the worst for it.
I didn't actually believe that until I saw it really happen. There was a bunch of leaves on the track and our train came to a stop and I was like, what the hell? Drive over the leaves.
Yeah, I've been in the UK enough that I actually saw that happen, and same thing. I'm like, this does not happen. Oh Jesus, it actually does. So, yeah. So, okay, well now really I have to go though, so I'll be around on the interwebs and whatnot. So thank you everybody for listening.
Thank you for a great talk.
Thank you.
So maybe I could come back in the summer or something if I could come over.
Yes, please do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I was in Belarus a number of years ago in December, and like you had goodness knows how much snow over there, minus 24. Then coming back, we changed in Poland. It was Poland, but there's question marks about whether he's actually going to get out of Poland because of Heathrow being shut because of snow. Eventually, we did get back to Heathrow, and there was about maybe a millimetre of snow. I thought, hang on, we just come from Belarus. And there's some other people that on their flight from Belarus, they're actually sweeping the snow off the plane because where they'd had the doors up for people to get in, it'd been blowing in the doors. So they'd had to sweep it off first before they could take off.
Blooming egg.
A millimetre at Heathrow and mayhem. Because we only get it once every 10 years or whatever it is.
Yeah, we used to have some really good reasons for not going to school, living in Somerset in a rural village. Once we had a sheep run under the bus.
Oh.
So we all got sent home because they couldn't get it out.
No.
All right, what part of Somerset are you from?
A place called Nether Stowey. It's about 8 miles from Taunton.
Okay, I'm just north of Bridgewater in a village called Puritan.
I know Puritan very well. My brother lives in Bridgewater.
Oh, nice. Puritan or Bridgewater shit, but you know.
Yeah. Though I did enjoy their Christmas lights where the lights turned on before they managed to press the plunger. I thought that was brilliant.
That was beautiful. Yes, it was. It's rare that, because that was on, I think Russell Howard actually did that on his show, and it was, it's rare to see Bridgewater show up in the news, but hey, there we were.
Yeah, it used to be a phrase, NFB, normal for Bridgewater, when I was a kid.
Nice.
I think, is it Terry Pratchett who said that he'd been through Bridgewater once and it was the fastest place he's been through anywhere?
No idea. I'll take your word for it, though.
I do love home now. It's still home to me. All my family's down there.
Nice.
How long have you been down in the Southwest?
So I moved over from the States 5.5 years ago.
Have you ever been to the Squibbing after the carnival in Bridgewater?
No.
So, well worth doing. It happens at midnight, and they basically attach fireworks to sticks, set them on light, all the lights that are all going over the crowd, and the last one alight is the person who wins.
I've seen it, like pictures and stuff. I'm not a big fan of big crowds. So
Yeah,
and town center of Bridgewater after Carnival is an absolute nightmare.
True.
Carnival's interesting, but carnivals in general in this country are interesting. But yeah, whatever. No, I think the latest thing right now down this way is the fact that they've our mega coronavirus hub is done at the racetracks, but they have to pause coronavirus vaccinations to allow for horse racing to occur. All I can simply go is fucking Brits.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Oh, see you, Morty.
Yep, I'm also going to take off. I have to go read some papers for my master's so I can do some other stuff. Yay. But no, this was cool. Thanks for this.
Good luck, and we'll see you next month, hopefully.
Yep, have a good evening. Bye.
See ya.
Trying to remember where my last holiday was. Last time I was out of the house. I'm not quite sure. Well, last time out of the house, I'm not quite sure if it was the conference up in Hull, or whether it was Nottingham for ice hockey Olympic qualifiers. I can't remember which way round it was. And the Olympic qualifiers were in February in Nottingham.
Hull was early March, wasn't it?
I can't remember. They're both be around, but yes, that's my last proper holiday I had was Lithuania in January.
Can't remember my last holiday. My last conference was January, which was Copenhagen.
Right.
And the last day out of the house was March 16th last year.
I see. I went into isolation a week before the country shut down because I started to have a cough.
Oh dear.
But it was just a cough. And now my attitude would have been a bit different because it's more of a chesty cough than a dry cough. So
I think I'd be paranoid no matter what, to be honest.
It's every time you cough you get paranoid, don't you? No. If something goes down the wrong way, so you spit up. Oh no.
Pete, it was something you said, you laughed, and everybody else did too.
So it looks like I'm going to stop the live stream, by the way, to YouTube.
Oh yeah, I forgot that was still on.